Petaluma, California. Greetings, Petaluma.
It's Friday.
Hey, everybody.
You know what that means?
That must be two mooks and a mic.
Two mics and a mook.
That's something
man.
like that.
Matt,
yeah.
how are you?
I'm fine, Jim. How are you?
Matt McGuire over there just said he's fine. I am fine, too.
And Jim Thomas apparently is fine.
I'm fine, too, even though the Warriors lost last night. But you know what? It's because you left too early, Matt, you and Larry. But we're not going to hold it against you.
Well, let's get. I think maybe they'll have a chance to make that up.
Oh, are you inviting yourself back? You better stay the whole time.
Now we have another invitation for Sunday.
Who invited you?
Gary and Donna.
Oh, goodbye then. Not talk.
But we'll come back.
I won't talk to you this whole show.
Are we coming across as Warriors fans here? You know, it's like.
Well, last time we were wrestling on the rug before the show. Now we're just arguing.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, it's a good thing we have a special guest with us today. He's an psychologist, counselor,
social worker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we really need to, we're going to call on our friend here, Sam Tuttleman.
Yeah. I mean, you might have heard of Sam. He was here before, and he had some adventures that he was going on.
Yeah, Sam's been our guest before, and he's just gotten back from Israel, and we're going to talk about that after we do our news rundown here. But welcome, Sam. We're glad
you're glad to be here.
Nice you're here.
Yeah, excellent. So, of course, it's a crazy week. Robert Mueller did a public resignation. He really kind of didn't do what a lot of us hoped he would do, which is come right out and say...
Point the finger.
Yeah, well, in lawyerese, he did. He said, you can't charge a sitting president under the DOJ, Department of Justice rules and the current laws, and so we couldn't do that, and he's basically saying, okay, there's other ways, meaning Congress can impeach.
Right, or wait till Trump leaves office, too. That's the second thing, but the Congress can impeach. But a lot of experts say, no, he's wrong on that. You actually can.
That's right.
Indict a sitting president, but it's complicated.
Yeah, and of course, everybody's making the political calculations, course,
exactly,
right? At this point, though, I mean, it's like we've raised this question before. At what point does Nancy Pelosi and the House have to take action because the crimes and offenses committed by Donald Trump are so egregious that, there's no excuse for not taking action.
And the hits just keep on coming. And after Mueller did his thing, Trump said, quote, I had nothing to do with Russia helping me get elected.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with it. And he also calls impeachment dirty, filthy, a disgusting word.
Oh, yeah.
You can't imagine the courts allowing it to happen. How about that?
But, of course, he's happy to have taken advantage let Russia work on his behalf. And that's one of the things that Mueller said was that, all Americans need to be concerned because Russia is queued up and ready to go to continue even more meddling in the 2020
Apparently
elections.
They're already starting some things with shenanigans in Florida. But anyway, Matt, at least 50 members of the House are now supportive of impeachment. This includes a growing number of committee chairs and 11 members of the House Judiciary Committee, which is where the inquiry would begin. Just 19 more members are needed before America can collectively exclaim, nice.
Yeah, good. Let's get there in a hurry because,
really.
You see everything, that Trump does, and it's time to put a stop to it. One of the things that I was disappointed with Mueller is that he didn't speak to Attorney General Barr's, misleading, if not outright lying about the report. Yeah. Really, and his silence on that and really just not coming out and saying impeachment is appropriate or Congress needs to impeach or using the I word leaves Trump in control of the debate.
Thank you.
And we all know how critical that is.
It is very critical. I would like to have Mueller come in and talk to the senators and House of Representative people, the Congress.
Yes.
He said he doesn't feel it's necessary, but it's not up to him, is it?
No, it's not. And in fact, as a private citizen, he is subject to, subpoena.
That's right.
And Congress has said they will subpoena him if they have to. They don't want to, but they will.
They do. And he actually resigned from the Department of Justice just a few days before he testified, which means he's now back to being a public citizen.
That's right.
All right.
So, and one of the things, I mean, it's like we got to stop Trump because, I mean, some people have winning streaks and some people have losing streaks.
Yeah.
And some people have vicious streaks.
Uh-oh.
And Donald Trump is the latter. He's, just as of yesterday, he's announced that he's going to impose a 5% tariff on all Mexican goods coming into the country starting June 10th. And to increase by 5% per month to a maximum of 25%.
And who's that going to hurt, man?
That's going to hurt Mexican and American people.
Right. Yes. Right. The consumers. Avocados going up.
Just
it's going
people.
to be ridiculous.
And, so it's caused an impact on the stock market. The Asian stock market has taken a hit because a lot of Japanese car manufacturers have their factories in Mexico and import the cars into the U.S.
That's right.
Food, clothing, all kinds of stuff. Really. And this is going to invite retaliation. I mean, Mexico is now America's largest trading partner.
More than Canada.
More than Canada and more than China.
Wow.
Because of the trade war with China.
That's right.
And it's something like approximately $350 billion worth of goods a year.
Yeah. Well, it says if it is imposed, new challenges to the measures likely would face swift legal challenges over whether the White House has the authority to impose tariffs.
That's right.
But even after the announcement, U.S. stock futures and global stock markets, guess what? They plummeted.
Yeah, because everybody's nervous that, Trump is crazy and stupid, doesn't understand how these things work.
No,
and
he doesn't.
Going to do damage.
He thinks it's going to be the countries who are the so-called enemy countries are going to be suffering. They're not. They just pass it on.
And, here's the thing. I mean, of course, the economy's running on the sugar high of the Make the Billionaires Richer tax law in the 2017, but something like this and the trade war with China can really, kick the slats out of the economy.
Let's talk about China. They're talking about they're ready to play the ace up the sleeve, and they say it's the rare earth metals.
That's right,
They're
and they pretty much
back.
control all the rare earth metals in the world, almost all of them. And they're saying that they're not going to buy American soybeans, which is.
Yeah.
Of course, in the meantime,
they can't do it.
The U.S. farmers are just like, they're going crazy.
They're literally underwater.
They're underwater. They've been flooded. They've got, record-breaking hurricanes.
Right.
And once again, a lone Republican for the third time has blocked the disaster aid bill.
3 freshman Republicans blocked it 3 separate times during the recess, and because they say, we don't have the budget for it. It's too expensive.
Yeah. And one of them was going, the debt, the national debt is too high, of course, thanks to that tax law that they passed in 2017. Right. And he's going, and there's not money in there to spend on the southern border wall. It's like he's complaining about too much money being spent and not enough money being spent. So there you go.
Go figure. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
It's like the old joke, the vaudeville joke about, people complaining about the lousy food at the resorts. And it's like, that food's so bad. Yeah, in such small portions, too.
Well, one of the things about the China and the rare metal, it's not necessarily rare itself. It's just really difficult to safely mine. They use it in smartphones, speakers, tablets, as well as items vital to weapon systems, lasers, radar, sonar, night vision systems, and jet engines.
Gee, we're happy to keep a weapon systems from being built.
That's good.
But pretty much all technology is dependent upon those rare earth
one
metals.
of the big aces up the sleeve that they don't mention in this article is they have so much of our debt, and they can call in the debt.
That's true.
Really
China
going
does.
To screw us. That's correct.
Yeah.
We're talking
That's
China.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back to the tariff on Mexico, the White House is claiming that there's a 1977 law that gives them the authority to do this, but he has to declare a national emergency.
Well, didn't he already do that with the border?
He did, and in fact, relating to that, one little good piece of news is that a federal district court in San Francisco, Judge Haywood Gilliam blocked Trump from spending the military allocated funds that he captured after declaring an emergency that he was going to spend on building that wall. Excuse me.
Got a frog in your throat there, man.
I do. Get out of there, Froggy. The judge basically they were going to actually start work on 51 miles worth of fence wall this past week, and the judge put a stop to it away.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
good.
Obviously, if he's declaring an emergency and then going to try to lay this tariff on, that's going to be challenged in court, and certainly we hope that once again courts save our bacon, because it's a very thin line between us and just out and out fascism.
That's right, and that's what McConnell is trying to change as fast as he possibly can.
Yeah, right. And speaking of him, he's like, the guy that wouldn't let Merrick Garland be heard for the Supreme Court, now he's going, appoint a rabid right-wing judge during an election year? Sure.
Of course I will. Yeah, and also he talked about the impeachment process. If the House of Representatives does start it and it goes to the Senate,
they'll squash it.
They will vote on it as fast as possible.
Yeah. But, at the same time, people make the argument that is going to show the Republicans for who and what they are.
Yes,
right?
Thank you.
And it's going to be, I think, an effective campaign tool. Yeah.
I hope so. I hope the Democrats can get their voices together and do
Absolutely, yeah. Speaking just as a side note on the good economy, quote unquote, was good if you were a CEO. CEO's average pay was about $12 million last year.
Oh man, I knew I forgot to do something right.
They averaged a 7% raise from the year before.
And workers?
Now, if you're a typical worker, the median worker gets somewhere around $47,000 a year.
Wow.
And their median raise was 3%, about $1,400.
Less than half.
So the 7% for the CEOs is about $800,000.
Unbelievable.
And you poor chump, you got $1,400.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, good luck trying to find a place to live in Petaluma.
Exactly. So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
so, Matt, I know you've been wondering about Roger Stone. So he's still awaiting trial in the Russian probe.
May he sink like a stone.
Yeah, well, he may be. But after the court granted him permission to judge the 2019 Exotic Dancer Invitationals at The Pony, which is a strip club in Memphis. Have you ever been there?
What?
I've never been to Memphis.
The judge is allowing him to do that?
And because he needs to raise money, he's the former Trump advisor, as you know. He's portrayed himself in the past as a libertine and a swinger. He needs to raise cash for his legal defense. So that's an idea I could do.
Wow, how about that?
Good judge.
Hey, and then the other big thing that before we get to our guest Sam here, there's these huge record-breaking storms going on in the Midwest and back east, and they've had 12 plus days of 8 or more tornadoes per day.
Yeah,
I mean, and
there's
people who towns and stuff who've been flooded since March. 2 months, and they're still waiting to drain.
And they're still waiting. Yes, that's right.
And of course, this is global warming, the
Climate
catastrophe of global warming coming home to roost. And I don't know, is God focusing on red states with his wrath?
They're awfully quiet. The evangelicals are awfully quiet about that, aren't they?
Not a peep that I've heard.
Yeah, but the scientists are changing their descriptor. They're not calling it climate change. They're calling it climate crisis,
which is more accurate.
Yeah, Bill Nye, the science guy, actually lit a globe on fire to show how important it was.
I saw that.
Yeah,
and that was great fun. And even though it was on the John Oliver show. And, it was done humorously, but the point is not to be denied.
Shocking.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So, all right. Well, that's. I think that's a good enough roundup for us.
Let's get on to fun things.
Sam, thanks for joining Two Mooks here.
Yeah,
my pleasure, and I really appreciate the invitation to come back.
Yeah.
So refresh our listeners of where you went, because last we talked to you, you were about to go to Israel, and why did you do that? What was your purpose? And what did you learn?
So, God, I can't even remember. It seems like it was months ago. I think I've been back 3 weeks. I was part of a 45-person delegation organized by the Center for Jewish Nonviolence that was dedicated to co-resistance with Palestinians in the occupied territories.
It's pretty unusual.
So how long were you there?
So we were there. I was there. I went a couple of days early to deal with jet lag, which always knocks me down for days. Yeah. But the delegation actually lasted 9 days, and we spent very brief period of time in Israel proper, and spent almost all of our time in the occupied territories.
Okay, and what on the West Bank?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will you tell the listeners where the occupied territories actually are?
Okay. It's hard to do this without a map.
Just use your hands.
Essentially, I'm doing it with my hands. Between the Jordan River and Israel is one of the only countries in the world that has no fixed boundaries.
They're fluid.
Well, they choose not to define their boundaries. But from the Jordan River essentially to where the 1948 lines
which
of
is
Israel
which is approximately halfway to the coast, would you say?
Which defined Israel back in 1948.
Right.
Okay.
So that's where the West Bank is, and then Gaza is a whole separate piece down in the
southwest
corner, bordering on Egypt.
On the coast.
Interestingly, many of the Palestinians we talked to, one of their great dreams in life, because their movements are restricted, is to go see the Mediterranean.
Oh
my God!
They've never been to the beach.
Wow.
And how far away is that as the crow flies?
You know, everything is so. I mean,
Within 100 miles,
One-
less than 100 miles.
it's probably 50 or 60 miles.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh.
once you go there, one of the
Wow.
absurdities of this conflict is that everything is so close.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes no sense
Well, I
even
was,
on that level.
you know, you sent me some information. I was looking at a map and I saw where Jerusalem was, and then like Ramallah is maybe 40 miles away, and Hebron is maybe 40 miles away in the other direction, something like that. Very close.
And Bethlehem is, you know, depending on traffic and stuff, a 20-minute drive from Jerusalem.
Yeah. So you were on the West Bank, and you were staying in like small Palestinian villages.
So our base was a hotel in Bethlehem.
Okay.
And we did spend overnight in the we were divided into 3 groups, but I spent the night in the village of El Khair,
Okay.
which is one of the villages that is resisting the occupation.
Okay.
And under constant threat by right-wing settlers who are always trying to usurp their land, and the Israeli Defensive Forces, the IDF,
So the military as
who enforce repression, basically, unfair laws, etc. Right?
Well, I mean, yes, that's all true. I mean, the occupation. I mean, people need to understand this occupation has been going on since 1967, so that's 52 years.
Yeah.
So imagine a military occupation of your land, of Petaluma.
Your home.
If we had been occupied for 52 years, and let me, if I may, just give you some of the tools of the occupation.
Yeah.
Because it's really in some ways quite diabolical. So to understand the occupation, you have to understand that there are now over 130 settlements which are illegal by international law, but are legal under Israeli law.
And encouraged by the Israeli government.
And the U.S. government.
That's right.
So there are 413,000, this is as of the end of 1917, Israeli citizens who live in the West Bank, in these settlements. And the thing that's very hard to understand until you see it is the settlements are on the high ground. So typically they're very close to a village or villages
Right.
who are all in these little valleys.
Right.
And that's done for very strategic purposes. Right. Okay, so you have all these settlements. They're all connected by roads. Palestinians are not allowed on many of these roads. So the roads are built so that you can commute from a settlement to, say, Jerusalem, you know, in a reasonable period of time.
Right.
So you have roads that Palestinians are not allowed on. There are electrical grids that connect all of the settlements to the Israeli power grid.
Right.
Palestinian villages are not allowed to hook up to those grids. So either they use generators or they don't have electricity.
Yeah.
You see solar panels now in a lot of the villages, but they're always under threat of demolition.
Right. By settlers and.
Well, no, by the army,
and the army.
because they don't have permits.
So they come in and just destroy them or confiscate them, and that's it.
Yeah, they can come in and
No
destroy
retribution.
And then
Recompense.
and in the villages, they typically, if they want to build a new home, they cannot get a permit from the government. And then so if they end up having to build something because their family's growing and it's crowded, then they're unpermitted. And tell us about what you were telling us before the show about the drones.
Right. Could I just say one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Just again, to give you a sense of the demolitions in El Khair, which, you know, I think may have 80, 90, 100 people living in it. And they have lots of goats and sheep and all those kind of animals. It's how they support themselves. Every house but 2 is under a demolition order.
Oh, wow.
Even though they own the land. I mean, there's no question that they own the land. These people in 1948, during what Israelis consider the War of Independence and Palestinians consider the Nakba, the catastrophe, they were driven from their homes. They're Bedouins. So they lived in the desert in what is now southern Israel. They were displaced, part of the 750,000 Palestinians who were displaced from their homes, driven from their homes. And they bought the land that they're on currently, but they can't get permits to build. So if you look at their houses or what they live in, they're mostly tents or sort of shacky things. But part of the reason for that is they're constantly under threat of demolition. So at any moment, they can be demolished. Now, one of the to me, one of the most perverse things about the home demolition issue is you get a notice that your home can be demolished, but they don't tell you when they're going to demolish it. So it could be tomorrow.
Oh,
it
really?
could be next week. It could be a month from now. It could be a year from now.
So some people have labored with that over their heads for years then.
So I'll give you an example. So we spent the night in the village of Umacher, and we were there to do a work project. And the community center had been built by a previous delegation, and the village had asked us to come in and paint a mural and spruce up, a lot of the things around the community center. Community center had been demolished, by the way, because they didn't have a permit, and it's been since been rebuilt and faces further demolition. Anyway, so we were supposed to leave early that afternoon, and we got word just as we were about to leave that 2 villages away there had been a home demolition. And what that means is the army shows up with men in ski masks, with bulldozers, who are private contractors, and the army protects them, and they go in and they demolish houses and animal pens.
Just bulldoze it down.
Bulldoze it. They give the families 10, 15 minutes to get their stuff out.
Wow.
And then they have these big bulldozers, and they just bulldoze
Jesus.
it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
we weren't going anywhere because this was going on, and the people in the village were very concerned that they were going to be next.
Were you a form of protection by being there?
No, because we had people it was the village of Susia, and a third of our group was in Susia.
Yeah.
So no,
Didn't matter.
we didn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand, these are soldiers in full combat gear, body armor, assault rifles.
And they wear ski masks, so you can't
No,
see
the
that.
soldiers
the
don't wear ski
contractors.
masks. The contractors wear ski
Oh.
masks.
You can't recognize
They're
them.
civilians.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're waiting in this village, not knowing if Umelcher was going to be next. And I remember so poignantly sitting next to this older woman. I'm not sure exactly how old she was. And somebody had a live stream of the demolition that was going on in Susia. And I'm sitting there with her watching this live stream. And, she had no expression on her face, just clicking her prayer beads. And I'm sitting there just trying to imagine, what is it like living with the constant threat
Of being
of
bulldozed,
having your home demolished?
destroyed.
Where did the Palestinians get strength? Because that would not just demolish the homes, but demolish the goal. It seems is to demolish the spirit and the will to stay.
So there's actually a word for that. It's called Sumud, S-U-M-U-D, and it means steadfastness. And one of the things that I guess amazes me is because I always wonder, so what would I do? How
sure.
would I act if I was in their position? If Petaluma was occupied. And remember, this has been going on since 1948 and really before then.
Yeah.
And in almost all of the villages in the South Hebron Hills, which was the area we were in, there are nonviolent resistance committees, and they resist the occupation in whatever ways they can nonviolently.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, their spirit has not been broken.
What does Israel do against these nonviolent people? I'm sure that they're not agreeing to be their side being nonviolent, right? They still do what they do.
Well, I can give you an example of what happened when we tried to repair a road.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you were just a team of like 100 people, right?
Well, our group was 45 people, and then we were joined by a number of Palestinians, and also an Israeli-based group called All That's Left, which was also made up of diaspora Jews. And so there is a road that branches off the main road. It's a rocky dirt road. Let me. What is it? 680 that goes from between Fairfield and Vallejo down to like Concord and Walnut Creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever been on that? Those big brown hills most of the year.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's what the area we were in looks like, except the hills there are much steeper.
Very dry.
They're not mountains, but
Yeah.
they're very dry hills. So there is a road that branches off the main road at the base of a settlement, and it goes down into a valley where there are 5 villages that have refused to leave, even though Israel has declared it a military firing zone.
That's right. Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. So this road,
live fires.
yeah, yeah. As if they don't have other places like the desert to test weapons if they wanted to. So this road is really the only lifeline for this village. Now, remember, if they're going to use generators, they need gasoline, food, obviously.
Right.
It's not a great agricultural area.
Water?
Or they take their animals to market
water,
or something.
Again, Palestinian villages are not allowed to hook into the water grid. So they have to truck in all their water.
Holy cow.
Traditionally, they would gather their water in cisterns.
Right.
And again, these get demolished if they're built. And in one village, in Susia, they were actually accused of stealing groundwater.
Jeez.
Stealing groundwater.
Wow.
Okay, so this road, goes on probably for a couple of miles. So we along with the other group, we're going to do some repairs on the road so it could be navigable for folks, and understand that the Israeli Supreme Court said that Palestinians have a right to use the road, but the occupation government has refused to give them a permit to fix the road. Okay. So 100 of us gather. We deliberately didn't have tools, so no one could accuse us of having weapons. So we had buckets and we were collecting rocks and trying to fill in the potholes with rocks. And when we got there was already an Israeli military vehicle. They sort of looked like big Jeeps that were there. Within a half hour of our being there, I counted 18 vehicles, which included 2 Border Patrol cars and like a jail bus, the bus.
Big paddy wagon.
Yeah, but bus size.
Yeah.
And so we started repairing the road. We counted, again, this was early on, 31 soldiers. And again, they're totally armed.
Armed to the teeth.
I mean.
Intimidation.
Yeah, I mean, there is no question that they are interested in demonstrating force. If they had wanted to stop us,
they could have
without
easily.
A confrontation. There are checkpoints all on the roads. They could have stopped us long before we got there because we had to go in a bus. So we start working on the road. The typical tactic that the army uses to stop things like this is they get an order. I don't know who they get it from, that basically declares a closed military zone. So they come with a piece of paper that says, not that anybody could figure out exactly what the closed military zone was, but they said, okay, you've got 15 minutes to get out of here, or you violated the closed military zone. So of course we don't
to arrest.
Right. So of course we don't leave, and we continue to work on the road. And they send soldiers out in the field, so they're sort of flanking us. Again, these are armed soldiers with combat weapons.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know exactly what triggered it. They threw a couple of concussion grenades, and it was very clear that there were certain people they wanted to arrest. So they were very selective in who they arrested.
Who did they want to arrest?
They definitely wanted to arrest the Palestinian activists.
Okay.
But a lot of them we made sure that they got away. They did brutalize one of the young men, who was not able to run very fast.
And you witnessed this? I mean, they were...
Oh, yeah.
So what happened? So they threw a couple concussion
grenades, and then they moved in, and then they pulled the people out that they wanted. So there was one of the head rabbi for an Israeli group called Rabbis for Human Rights. They wanted him. They took him.
He was living in Israel?
Yeah, he's Israeli.
Okay, all right.
And they were just very selective. I mean, they could have arrested 50
Everybody,
of us very easily.
Yeah.
But they ended up arresting 2 Palestinian journalists, another rabbi, and a number of other people.
Sounds really strategic.
Yeah, and they took them off to I guess a jail or a holding place in one of the large settlements that was nearby.
And
then
the person who was beaten up, did they take him to a hospital? Did they just cart him off? What did they do with him?
So there were 2 people. One was a member of our group, and one was a Palestinian young man. No, they put them in all kinds of stress positions. One guy got punched in the face. Yeah, I mean, it was unnecessary, brutal treatment.
So
I mean, we
was-
were committed to nonviolence.
Right.
This was really just an attempt to terrorize a nonviolent group doing something constructive.
And it sounds like this is something that's going on and on and on.
And was there much? Did you get to make any progress on the road at all before all this?
Not. I mean, first of all, it's very hard without tools.
Yeah, really.
You know,
Right.
to do a whole lot. I mean, we filled in a bunch of potholes.
It's fairly symbolic.
yeah.
But it was much more of a symbolic act of resistance. You know, I think one of the ways the Center for Jewish Nonviolence thinks about what they're doing is as co-resistance, as being very similar to in the 60s when a lot of, you know, white young people mostly, but other people as well went to the South, participated in freedom rides,
Register voters.
you know, essentially using, in our case, our privilege as diaspora Jews, because again, it's less likely that Israel is going to do things to us that will make them look bad in
the
international press.
And they
That's
knew
right.
who you were because you had to turn over your passport or show your passport when you came into the country, right? So were they tracking your movements, do you think?
I mean, Israel.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But getting into Israel is a whole very interesting process. So
Yeah, because they don't let anybody in that they don't want in.
well, here's the line of questioning that you usually get. Okay, so you get off the plane,
Right.
go through the usual walking down hallways
Right,
and stuff,
right.
and then you get to I guess border stations, which are manned mostly by very bored-looking, mostly young women who are doing their military service. So y'all have probably crossed international boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Anybody ever asked you your religion?
No,
No.
they do there.
And
Yeah.
so if you were to go and say, I'm Christian, would they say, no problem?
Probably not. You probably wouldn't have any problem.
And if you were to say, I'm Jewish, what would they?
Well, the time before I got a very big smile and, you know, welcome to Israel and come on in. If you're young,
Yeah.
if you're a person of color, if you're Palestinian, your chances of getting sent to what euphemistically is called the room is much higher.
Or
So-
if you're Muslim, probably.
well, yeah.
And the room is
The room is a place that you go for further interrogation.
background checks and things.
Okay, so, you know, they may Google you to see if you're an activist or not. And it now is Israel can now disallow people entry if they support the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So that's a grounds for
Yeah.
for not allowing people in the country.
Wow.
So a number of well-known activists, actually, and journalists have not been allowed in the country.
Right.
The other woman from Sonoma County I went with said, we have nothing to worry about. I'm 71, she's 75. She said, gray hair gets you everywhere. And it's true. This time they didn't even ask us any questions.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
You know, going back, Sam, to some of the things that the sort of insidious techniques that both the settlers and the government use. You'd mentioned before the show that people can't get permits to build on their own land. Sometimes they build then out of necessity, but they're being spied on by drones all the time.
Okay.
Is that right?
So this was total news to me. There is an organization called Regavim, Regavim, which purports to be an environmental organization. But if you go to their website, you find out that their premise is that the land that rightfully belongs to Israel, which is the West Bank, is being taken away. They don't quite say it explicitly by Palestinians, which is such an absurd
assertion.
Alice in Wonderland kind of an assertion, because it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Protecting our national lands, it says right here.
So one of the things that they do is they fly drones over Palestinian villages, and they check to see if anything new has been built. And
go ahead. Go ahead.
And then what they do is they report it to the army, and if the army does not act, they actually will take the government to court.
Take the
And
army to
sue
court.
them because they're not
And sue
doing
them
anything.
to try and compel them to go.
Wow.
And I'll give you, again, in the village of El Khair, I mean, this is the absurdity. There is a settlement literally 50, maybe 25 yards from the village. I mean, you can see the gate, you can see the houses.
Yeah.
So the traditional oven where they bake bread is called a taboon.
This is like an outdoor communal oven.
Yeah. But it's covered. I mean, smoke obviously comes out of the top.
Yeah.
The settlers complained that the smoke was bothering them and got a demolition order for the taboon because the smoke was bothering them, which is just
so
absurd.
Any little thing to harass the Palestinians is okay, and this is what they're looking for.
If you look at the makeup of who lives in the settlements, it's really interesting. Some of them are just there out of economic necessity.
Right.
The Israeli government subsidizes the settlements, and I was amazed at how expensive things are in Jerusalem and all over Israel. I mean, you couldn't go to even just a regular old plain restaurant and not spend $30 on a meal.
Wow.
Really?
Okay.
It's really, really expensive. So the housing, being able to get subsidized housing. So some people are there for economic reasons, but there is a core of people who are there because they believe they are reclaiming Judea and Samaria to go back to the Old Testament, for the rightful owners who are, according to them, the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And they are allowed to carry weapons. Palestinians are not allowed to have weapons.
Right.
You can go online and find the statistics of how many attacks against Palestinians happen by settlers.
Are there charges against these settlers when they attack the Palestinians?
No. I mean, yes, there are
in
some,
rare
there are some
cases,
egregious instances.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. And if you want to see some interesting, scary videos, go on YouTube and just look for settler youth. So these often are the children of America, people who came from the United States and moved there. And they are there for ideological, religious reasons.
Okay.
They have a policy called price tag attacks. So if a Palestinian in the West Bank does something that they don't like, somebody gets attacked or a building gets defaced or whatever.
A car gets lit on fire.
Right. They will take it upon themselves to carry out a price tag attack of equal or greater value.
So it's like a vigilante group, but
exactly
equal value.
Exactly. And it's only in the most egregious cases where somebody gets murdered that
The courts
sort of
might
reluctantly
actually step in.
And one of the things you have to understand is there's two justice systems in the occupied territories. Israelis are subject to Israeli law.
Right.
Palestinians are subject to a military regime.
Yeah, because they are under occupation.
Right, they're under occupation. So you don't have the kind of redress that you would have in a normal situation.
Yeah.
What effect are you having? Do you feel like there's a hope at all? Do you feel like you're going there actually made a difference, or is making a little bit of a difference?
Yeah. Was this trip successful, Sam?
I mean, it's a really interesting and important question. So before I left, so I have this thing about when I'm involved in political work, it's really not a good idea to do something just because it makes you feel better. That's always been my, okay, great, wonderful. We have a demonstration of 100 people and nothing happened, nothing changes.
Yeah.
So I've always been one to say, just because it makes you better to do something that's going to really make a difference, even if it's over a long term. So I sort of did this impulsively. I'd become increasingly frustrated with going to meetings, showing movies, writing op-eds, writing letters to the editor, talking to the same 45 people.
The crickets.
It's like, and so I saw this, and I didn't know the organization. And I went, okay, I'm just going to go do something to make myself feel better, but I'm going to do it in the occupied territories.
Yeah.
And that was really the appeal to me.
It's kind of ballsy.
And the name of the organization?
Center for Jewish Nonviolence.
Thank you.
I feel a little bit differently having come back.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, no, I don't think it makes much difference. I think unfortunately, the fate of the Palestinian people really lies in the hands of the Trumps and the Liebermans and the Sultan, whoever, whatever their titles are from the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But I think it really makes a difference for the Palestinian people on the ground that we interacted with. I've been around the block enough time to know when I'm seeing sort of genuine relationships, and I'm not saying the people who participated in this had them, but it was very clear the organizers of Center for Jewish Nonviolence have very close and meaningful relationships with the people who are head of the resistance, and these are all nonviolent resistance
The
groups
Palestinians,
in the South Hebron Hills. And you could just see that over and over again in terms of the way people were greeted in the conversations.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a difference for those people on the ground who are resisting.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of goes to
That's
your
good.
question, Jim, about the Palestinian spirit, and that must give them great spiritual support
To know that you
and-
care and you come all the way from the
Right,
United
Yeah,
States to do this.
it's a real demonstration.
The Center
more than
for
lip service.
The Center for Jewish Nonviolence, their website is cjnv.org, if anyone's interested in it.
Good.
And
yeah.
I have to say, one of the really interesting things to me about all this is there were probably, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 trip leaders, and I bet I'm not sure any of them were over their mid-30s.
So the
Really?
youth, it's the youth that's stepping up.
And of our group, of the 45 of us, 37, 38, were I again would say between 25 and 35.
Well, that's good
And
news.
they were incredibly inspirational.
Good.
I mean, every one of them was extremely knowledgeable.
Spoke Arabic.
Some of them spoke, not
Okay.
everybody, but
All right.
they all spoke Hebrew.
Okay,
Not all
right.
of them, but it seemed like everybody spoke Hebrew,
Okay.
which I don't speak. And I have to say they sort of go about doing things very differently than my generation does. I mean, they can't start a meeting without doing guided imagery and singing songs and doing all these things. But
It's nice. It works.
Whatever works, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it's a generational difference. But
Yeah.
but
Now, are these people from around the world? Are with these Israelis? Are these Americans? Or
so our group were I think all from the United States. A couple of
Okay.
people from Canada.
Okay.
And they're from all over. There was a big contingent from Boston, people from Chicago, about 5 or 6 people from the Bay Area.
and then you had mentioned before the show the Birthright program. Tell our listeners about that, Sam.
So one of the again more insidious ways that American Jewish youth are sort of inducted into a whole set of beliefs about Israel is called Birthright. And basically, if you're Jewish, and I think it's between 18 and 25 or 18 and 26, you can get a free trip to Israel.
The government will pay for your trip.
Well, it's not the government.
Oh, is it
People like
just
Sheldon
groups?
Adelson.
Sheldon Adelson, a guy
Sheldon
who-
Adelson.
an evil person who gives millions of dollars to settlers and their right-wing
Right.
aggressive organizations.
Yeah, but do you have to fly coach?
Probably.
Yeah.
You probably have to fly coach, but it's set up to be a fun adventure.
Come to the homeland.
Yeah, learn about
land of
your roots.
ancestors.
And you spend time with, you have to understand the Israeli army, you go into the army when you're 18. So you get to hang out with soldiers, you get to stay up late at night on the beach. It's designed to be a fun time. At the same time, it's a propaganda
I was going to
machine.
say propaganda is fun.
And I would say that some huge number of people who are part of our group had been through Birthright.
Yeah. Wow.
And as part of their disillusionment process and learning process, now
They saw through it.
They
and
saw through what
saw
happened.
the realities.
I
Good
don't-
for them.
I don't necessarily want to go here, but I'm going to go here anyway. And I keep thinking when you're talking of the Nazi occupation and the resistance against the Nazis, and you talk about the nonviolent resistance, is there anything that's like monkey wrenching that's going on that Palestinians or Jews who support the Palestinians are helping them in doing that to sabotage in little bits and ways they can what the occupation is doing?
well, I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I don't claim to understand. Well, I think anything like that is done with a high level of security, so it's not
And
something that
secrecy.
can get
and
talked
very
about.
judiciously, because the Israeli state does have very penetrating intelligence, and they watch everything.
Well, like
and
you said, even
track
with the
everything.
drones. Yeah. I'm sure with all the electronic communication, they're aware of that too.
Exactly. And they've got such tight control on so many aspects of the society.
But also, weren't you talking about the settlements on the hills? And they would hurl stuff down, wouldn't they? I would imagine.
Or shoot their guns from up there.
Well, it's very common that trees will be olive trees, citrus trees will be cut down. Fields
by settlers cutting down Palestinian groves. And
anything to hinder the Palestinians.
Part of what it is very clear is happening is so the West Bank is divided into three parts under the Oslo Accords. The largest part of the West Bank is called Area C, which the South Hebron Hills that we were in.
Areas A, B, and C.
Right. A are the 8 or 9 large Palestinian cities. Area B is usually around them, but Area C is where most of the settlements are.
Which is more rural type landscape.
Most of it. And it's pretty clear that the whole purpose of all these harassment of Palestinians, destruction of homes, promoting really horrible living conditions, is to drive Palestinians into those cities.
A and B.
Where they are more easily controlled.
Well, I think yes, that's true.
And then the land.
But I think it's really a matter of annexing the land. Remember, Netanyahu promised that if he was elected, he was going to annex
Golan Heights. Yeah,
all of the
all of C.
Golan Heights has already been annexed.
Yes,
but Area C, he was going to annex the settlements, which means essentially annexing Area C. And if you look at a map. It's actually really fascinating. So if you look at a map of the West Bank today, the occupied territories, what you'll see is, let's say the areas A and B are in green. Okay. So you'll see these disconnected splotches, which are the major population areas. And the rest of it is sort of and they're floating in this sea of gray. I'm just thinking of a map that I have.
Yeah.
Okay. If you go back and think about South Africa,
apartheid.
Think about the Bantustans.
That's exactly right.
Which were the supposed homelands for the various tribal groupings. And so in the same way, you had Bantustans that were not contiguous, that were totally separated.
Isolated. And
what did South Africa's apartheid government study to come up with the idea of Bantustans?
Israel.
No. Oh, no. The United States and our Native American reservations.
I was just going to say something about that, yes.
So feel great that we have passed on this wonderful heritage of stealing people's land and taking away their
up to now providing multiple billions of dollars per year to Israel in the form of military hardware and weapons and ammunition.
So this is not a random. I mean, this is a well thought out strategy to reclaim. The whole issue of not having fixed borders. I mean, why would you not have fixed borders? Well, because you want to gobble up.
You're talking about the borders between Palestinian lands and Israel, or the exterior, the perimeter of Israel.
Right. Israel won't define its its borders.
Move the goalposts. So, 2-state, 1-state solution.
Yeah, we talked about this.
I'd like to hear it again from you after you came back.
In some ways, it's an absurdity at this point to think about there being a 2-state solution.
Yeah.
When you think about over 400,000 settlers living, in the occupied territories, when you think about the number of settlements, we haven't even talked about the 100+ illegal settlements, even under Israeli law, that the army still allows to hook up to the power grid. The settlements metastasize. So you'll see these little hillsides with maybe a couple of trailers and a
TV antenna or something.
Yeah, a cell phone tower. Those are illegal, but
nobody's abating them.
And the army protects them.
Yeah.
On rare occasions you'll hear of one being dismantled.
Yeah.
So, at some point you have to say how does this all get untangled? How could you ever untangle it?
Jared Kushner has a way.
Yeah, right.
We don't know what it is yet.
Well, the outlines of it appear to be maybe a typical Trump-esque way of buying people off. We're going to give you all this money for economic development. Of course, you're going to have no control over your political life, but we'll make a few people rich and then everybody will be happy.
Yeah, right.
So I look at it and I go, I don't understand how you would ever untangle it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's very hard to imagine the state of Israel, when you think about the birth rates, allowing itself to be a binational state.
Yeah.
Where, the number of Palestinians could be equal to the number of Jewish residents of the state.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's hard to imagine in practice how this all gets untangled.
Yeah, it is so snarled up. But that's where I think we have to go back to fundamental human values and just say, look, everybody is entitled to their inherent human rights, and you need a just system to enforce that. And we're just like as far away from that, it seems, as ever possible.
And not just in Israel, Palestine, but here.
No, everywhere. I mean, that's. People are crying out for, fairness and justice around the world. And, there's a seed of that in the nationalist movements and, triggered by economic stratification, et cetera.
That's everywhere,
but this is an extremely complex situation. And really, how do you get to that goal?
Maybe it's enlightenment.
Well, I think the original sin has got to be acknowledged.
A sin of.
And the original sin to me is, I totally understand how Jewish people would felt after the Holocaust and after World War II.
Right.
But the problem is that to decide the solution is to dispossess
somebody else,
750,000 other people,
from their homes,
Right.
is no solution.
Yeah, two wrongs don't make a right.
But it wouldn't necessarily be that same way if the United States weren't backing them. If the United States weren't giving them all this military and
that there might be
money
some more
and
impetus
supplies
for
and that
solutions.
type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean they're
They
the
have
largest.
to get along with the other every other group, right?
Well, and this is where I guess my pessimism comes in, because it's so clear that from the perspective of our government, this is so caught up in the bigger issues of the Middle East and oil and whatever other strategic interests
Are there,
that the Palestinian people become pawns in a game,
in the geopolitical game. It's that one thing has to, you have to stop the infliction of the wrongs, seems to be the right starting point, which is why it's important that Jewish Voices for Peace and the different organizations are in there doing that work. That is critically important work. And it's also clear that being an ever more militarized state has not improved Israel's chances of either survival or prospering. It's really when you are inflicting repression on a whole, huge portion of your population, that's only going to incite the natural human need to be free and to fight back. And that is going to constantly taint whatever's going on, whatever other successes the state of Israel is having, economically, culturally, educationally. It is going to be a constant poison. And that's, it just cannot survive forever like that.
They can if they get outside support, which they are.
Well,
and we keep giving them support in this.
It can last a long, long time and way beyond when it should be gone. But certainly, in the history of humanity, you've seen that cannot be sustained and has never successfully.
I agree with you, but so far I don't see anything on the horizon except maybe apartheid to South Africa that you brought up.
Well, one of the things, and Lord knows we could use a dose of this in this country as well, that while it hasn't changed a lot of the issues in South Africa, is the whole truth and reconciliation process, which also went on in Rwanda.
Yeah.
And I know to a certain extent, because I worked in Uganda for 5 months, has happened in Uganda after the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army, wreaked havoc, where essentially people on both sides sit down and acknowledge what happened.
Yes.
And what their role in it
that
was.
Is a
and that's
critical
also
starting
Cambodia,
point.
Right? Some of that is happening too, with the Shining Path and all of that. The people are talking. And maybe that's the way to go.
Well, I also lived in worked in Cambodia for 3 months, and one of the things they don't talk about is how the current prime prime minister or president, I forget, actually was in the Shining Path.
Yeah, really.
I didn't
And
know
then
that.
convert.
Okay.
Yes. So there's some
There's
some interesting nuances to all
Yeah.
that.
I
And
guess
South
so.
Africa, it's like one of the things that was supposed to happen with the termination of apartheid was there's supposed to be equitable land reform. Well,
That's
there's
right.
only been 8% changed hands of the
Right.
from the ruling whites to
Has
to
it
the
stopped,
native.
Matt, or is it continuing?
Well,
at this?
it's actually there's a good article in the recent New Yorker about it. There are some efforts to go on, but unfortunately, the African National Congress has got a streak of corruption in it, and they've been in charge ever since the end of apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
There are financial interests of people and that at play here. It's bollocked up pretty good.
So
Maybe not quite as badly as Israel and
possibly there's
Palestine.
hope. So you were saying you're kind of pessimistic earlier. I'm thinking possibly there's hope. Maybe.
Well, let me ask
We
you
get
this,
some
Sam.
enlightenment, but it sounds like in the near future, not much.
Well-
would you go back and do it again?
I've thought about it.
Okay.
So
So it's
I've
an
thought
open
about it.
possibility.
But I think, and I would agree with my friend Joan, who also went on this, that our work is really here. Where we can have the most impact is and again, that's why I thank you for having me on. Is really trying to have some impact on the hearts and minds of folks, and
Our elected leaders who are,
Beholden.
a lot of them support, the status quo
Right.
over there.
So one of the things that was shared with us was this quote from this man, M.K. Asante. It's very short. It's like
Yeah.
10 words. And he said, when you make an observation, you have an obligation.
Huh.
And I thought that was really, really very much to the point. He's a filmmaker and professor here in the United States. And I think I've come back really re-energized, and I know other people who are on the delegation, to take on that obligation of speaking
Good.
and trying to let people know what the
Good.
situation is like,
Good.
so that they can get beyond, the propaganda that
Yeah.
gets put out there.
So the information has to come to us. It's much easier than if we have to go and search for it and know what we're searching for and why we're searching for it. But if it just is in our faces or in our consciousness, then maybe things will happen a little bit faster.
Yeah. Yeah, folks, this is Two Mooks and a Mic, and our guest is Sam Tuttleman.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Sam has just gotten back from an excursion to Israel to work with Palestinians to resist the repression going on there by settlers and the army and the Israeli government. Sam, that's I think a real act of courage.
I do too.
Yeah, somehow it didn't. It didn't seem that way. It just seemed like something, like I said
Constructive.
before. It seemed like something that I could do.
Yeah.
That was constructive. That was just different than the things that I've been doing. That somehow.
Well, from
sometimes
But you're
don't
making
seem
a
from
difference. You're
from
making
little-
a difference.
Yeah, no.
from little
That's
things,
good.
big things come, and
Ooh,
it's
acorn.
an accumulation of a lot of little things that can really turn the tide.
And
So-
hopefully some of our listeners will
Yeah.
be more interested. We have the websites that I broadcast out. So maybe-
And if people are interested in getting more information, you can go to the North Coast Coalition for Palestine, which is a local Sonoma County group's website.
And any other last 30-second thoughts before we go?
No, again, I just want to thank you all for giving me the chance
Well, no, thank you for
to
coming.
describe what.
Sam,
what
thanks
I
for
said.
Thanks
joining
for
us. Really
coming in.
appreciate
Yeah.
it. We'll have you back on again, my man.
Okay.
Matt,
Thank
he,
you.
he raised our dialogue to a new level, huh?
We're not arguing.
I don't agree with you on
Oh,
that.
that's it. Bye, folks.
Bye. See you next week.